My message to legislators today is come back and finish your work. Correct the $101 million error in the tax bill and restore the tax exemption for the State High School League. Then pass a bonding bill, which is the middle ground between the House Republicans' bill and the Senate DFL's and my bill. I initially proposed a bonding bill of $1.4 billion, which was less than half of the over $3 billion of good projects throughout the state. After refusing for months to make their bill public, House Republicans finally, with only days left in the session, released their $800 million bill. Last Friday, in discussions with Speaker Doudt, I offered to meet his caucus halfway at $1.1 billion. I also pointed out that $1.1 billion was halfway between the $995 million bill the House passed and my most recent proposal of $1.2 billion. His response, as I recall, was that he didn't believe his Republican caucus would agree to anything over $1 billion. That's not the kind of reasonable compromise that will be needed to bring us all back into a special session and provide Minnesotans with the tax relief and the building projects they need. This afternoon, at my invitation, we will sit down again to try to resolve our differences. I'm willing to meet the House Republican caucus halfway between our respective positions. I urge them to be willing to meet me there for the good of all Minnesotans. Glad to respond to questions. And since there are none, okay.
Vetoing the tax bill, is that an olive branch? How does that encourage them to come back?
Well, with all due respect, we've been through this before. I was not going to sign a tax bill with a $101 million error to it. I mean, that would have been foolish. I'm not responsible for the error. If the House caucus, Republican caucus, had gotten their bonding bill out, time to work on it, we wouldn't have had a bill on the last night of the session riddled with factual errors. If they passed a tax bill in a timely fashion and given everybody a chance to prove it, that error wouldn't have occurred. So this situation we're in is not my responsibility. And I'm willing to bring them back into special session, which is what I've been told. And I believe in the Commissioner of Revenue, and based on her legal advice, my legal advice, and a clear reading of the Minnesota statute is necessary in order to make that correction and have it stand up in court, which it would certainly be challenged if you were to not carry out the letter of the law. So, you know, I'm willing to sit down starting this afternoon and negotiate along with the Lieutenant Governor, with the caucus leaders, and we can work this out if there's a willingness to meet halfway.
What is halfway?
I just outlined I'm not going to negotiate here, but I just outlined what I said to the Speaker last Friday, halfway on the bonding bill between their $800 million that they finally came forward with, the House Republican caucus, and my $1.4 billion. Halfway is $1.1 billion.
Governor, are you now saying that you had previously said that that list of things you wanted added to the bonding bill were non-negotiable? Are you now saying that you're willing to negotiate over which things get added, but are insisting that some things do get added?
I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to meet them halfway. You know, we need a special session. We need to pass the tax bill. We need to pass a bonding bill that we can all may not agree with, but will agree to, for the sake of the betterment of Minnesota. So, you know, I would ask anybody who opposes my $1.2 billion proposal to tell me which projects they think are not important to Minnesota. Higher education, for the University of Minnesota campus, for the MnSCU system, making just basic repairs, which MnSCU said is their #1 priority. Their condition of their facilities are in such bad shape that MnSCU's board has said they would take their entire bonding allotment in what's called HEPRA and just basic repairs. So to shortchange them and to deny the University of Minnesota the Health Sciences building, which is absolutely critical to our economic future, a good quality medical program at the university, along with what Mayo's doing, is one of the cornerstones of our future economic success. So I just ask anybody who says, you know, my bonding bill is not acceptable, to tell me which projects would you take out?
So, Governor, last week you had that list of bonding bill projects and additional spending you wanted to see. Now, and you said it had to be all of it. Are you saying now it doesn't need to be all of it?
I'm not going to negotiate here. My position is, it had to be all of it. Their position is none of it. So I'm willing to find middle ground. I'm willing to compromise in order to reach an agreement and call them back to special session.
How can you negotiate from, it has to be all of it?
Well, I just said it. Today is today. And, my requirements are my requirements, and, their requirements are their requirements. So as I have been in the past. 2011, I offered to meet the Republican leaders halfway on the budget, and I went to the 50-yard line. They didn't leave the end zone. So we had a stalemate. If they're going to be intransigent once again and say we can't go over $1 billion on bonding, when I'm at now $1.2 billion, and the Senate was, I believe, $1.6 billion. I mean, that's not a compromise. That's not working out the reality that they control the House, and the DFL controls the Senate, and I'm governor. So, I'm willing to make accommodation with them, but it's got to be two ways, and we'll start those discussions this afternoon. At my invitation, we'll be meeting at 1:30, and we'll see if what's possible.
To continue your football analogy, they also come back at you and say you keep moving the goalposts. Are you doing that again by saying I want everything and now I'll meet you halfway?
Well, I said I want everything, and they want everything. So, we're that far apart. So the only way I know to resolve those differences is to find common ground somewhere in the middle, and I'm saying I'm willing to do that.
Governor, can you also satisfy us constitutional law geeks on why you decided to go this route of the pocket veto?
Well, because in Minnesota, as I've known for 39 years, is what's called a strict constructionist state. The letter of the law is the letter of the law. If there's ambiguity, then and then you'd have to go to court, then a judge can take into account legislative intent. But where the law is clear, and in statute is clear that when the law is clear, the letter of the law is clear, there's no deviating from that. We've already been put on notice by the Charitable Gambling Association that they will go to court if the Commissioner of Revenue were to apply the law any differently from the way it's written in clear English. So there's just nothing. This is why I get discouraged about the possibility of a special session. We can't agree on anything. They won't agree that they made a mistake, and they need to come back as a full legislature in special session to correct that mistake. They talk about their letters, and we've done this before on that. What I know is in this situation, I've been told by my counsel and by the Commissioner of Revenue that it's not even a judgment call. The law is clear, as it's written, the tax bill is clear, states clearly what the parameters are, and that would cost the state $101 million over the next 3 years. So, get over it, folks. That's the reality.
Point of situation in which you might call a special session just for the tax bill.
I've said I've got to have a bonding bill that I can find acceptable, bring them back for both.
Governor, to your point about you feeling discouraged, should the people with the stake in this tax bill be nervous? Say, for instance, the farmers, the folks in Medelia, or the people who want the soccer stadium, should they be nervous about this all falling apart?
Well, they should call their legislators, contact the legislators, as the legislature has been urging them to contact me, and tell them to reach a reasonable middle ground, and come back, and we'll do this in special session before. I think was the law take effect July 1st, or was the date of this enactment? The tax bill, July 1st. So the tax bill doesn't take effect till July. It wouldn't have taken effect till July 1st. So there's time now in the month of June to get this resolved and not affect anything that was in that bill besides the correction and the permanent exemption for the State High School League.
Have the leaders accepted your invitation to meet this afternoon?
Speaker Dowd is coming. Senator Han, what did we? Have not heard from Senator Han. So Representative Thiessen, Majority Leader Bach, Speaker Dowd. I had proposed 1 o'clock. They asked for 1:30, so I accommodated at 1:30. I have judicial appointments this afternoon, interviews, so I'm not going to be able to stay for the entire meeting, and I postponed those interviews last week, so it's not fair to the applicants to do that again.
Divided government in the state, and what should people outside the Capitol think when they see this kind of political dysfunction?
Well, they can draw their own conclusions. I would agree that they can make their own decisions whether divided government is best for Minnesota, and we'll have a chance to debate that in the months ahead around the state. But for right now, the voters of Minnesota in 2012 sent us a divided legislature. And it's our job, all of us, to make that work as well as possible. So, I mean, again, I'm ready to sit down and negotiate with the lieutenant governor, with the caucus leaders, and we need to find agreement so we can have a tax bill signed and all the benefits it provides, and free of the errors, and a bonding bill that is common ground between the House caucus position and the DFL Senate and mine. And I'm willing to be reasonable about that. I asked them to be reasonable too. If so, we should be able to settle this afternoon and move forward.
Within the context of the renegotiation of the bonding bill, the list that you issued of your requirements a few days back, however long ago that was, talking about St. Peter and also your statements on Southwest Light Rail and the ability for Metro Council to fund that. Do you consider that list an essential, are those must-haves even in the context of renegotiating the bonding bill number?
Those are my must-haves, and the House position is none of them. So again, when you're that far apart, you have to negotiate and reach common ground. I mean, St. Peter, I wouldn't wish to spend either bonding money, capital investment in St. Peter facilities, or provide the funds necessary to operate that safely for the residents there as well as for the staff. But the reality is the buildings are decrepit and they have to be improved so we can claim it's any kind of therapeutic environment. And the staff worked over a period of time, with months, with my administration to develop their list of what they felt they needed in staff to provide for safe staffing and for their safety as they do their jobs. So come back home safely to their families. And, I mean, that's just that's a requirement, not my requirement. It's a requirement of the people who need to put their lives on the line literally every day at St. Peter to keep the rest of Minnesota safe from those predators. So, to me, it's just, it's my requirement, yes. Now, if they don't or won't agree to that, we'll have to figure out something else. With Metro Transit, and it's not just light rail. It's about Metro Transit. The proposals that we've made on Metro Transit is allowing the counties in the metropolitan area to, of their own volition, if they decide, to raise revenues in order to do metro projects, including the Gateway Corridor and East Metro and the like, and to stifle the development of Metro Transit when our highways in the metropolitan area are already overly congested, and it's only going to get worse as we add more and more people. I mean, it's just, I'm not going to let them shortchange Minnesota. It's not a view metropolitan area. The business community, the chambers, and right along that southwest line, the business community, the Minnesota Business Partnership, have all come forward and said, we have to have Metro Transit. We have to improve Metro Transit. So this is not my requirement. It's a requirement we need for a healthy Minnesota, for a healthy metropolitan area, so the state can continue to grow economically.
Governor, the bill that stumbled the last night of the regular session was a bonding transportation hodgepodge. Will there be a motion on part of your administration to separate those two issues again and have a separate transportation bill, or is that a dead issue for this year?
Well, it's, again, that's up for discussion. It needs to be part of a prior agreement that both would be enacted. But whatever is the best way to get it accomplished. And in the transportation area, I've asked the Lieutenant Governor to spearhead those negotiations and talk with the authors of the transportation bill itself, Senator Dibble and Representative Kelly. I'm not optimistic, given various positions that have been taken already, that they're going to be able to achieve anything. But in the absence of that, then they'll have to look for what was put in the bonding bill, which is really, again, $300 million, even in one-time spending. If you look at the balance sheet for the state at the end of this biennium and the next, is really an excessive amount of general fund revenue to go into a transportation bill that doesn't solve the problem. So it's a one-time number. So again, I have to, we'll have to see what's possible. But and the projects that the House Republicans earmarked in their bonding bill for their pet transportation projects, disregarding MnDOT's procedures and objective priorities, and leaving all the rest of those projects all over the state with nothing forthcoming, is really, and it was not a responsible action. It was politically expedient, but it wasn't responsible for the best interest of the state. So that'll all be up for discussion when we sit down together.
So are you optimistic? You used the word discouraged earlier, but now explain how optimistic or pessimistic you are about getting a special session.
Well, I'm going to remain hopeful, but I'm also a realist. You know, we weren't able to agree on special sessions for Mille Lacs or for the range unemployed. I've been in this situation with Republican legislative leaders before, last year, in 2011. Again, I'm willing to meet halfway and find common ground, and if they're willing to do the same, then we'll get this accomplished. We should get it accomplished. There's no reason not to get it accomplished. It's just a matter of people agreeing to compromise what they sincerely believe in and find common ground.
Other than the two changes, the wording change and the high school league, are the contents of the tax bill now more negotiable, or do you just want it limited to those two and nothing other?
Well, I would certainly a topic for discussion with the legislative leaders. I think they open up the tax bill. Of course, they have to take it up again anew. But I think if they open it up, they're going to be free-for-all. There already is, I'm assuming they are too, or will hear from people who want this or that added or subtracted from the tax bill. My position is I'll sign the tax bill if they correct those correct that error, $101 million error, provide the high school league with the permanent tax exemption so they can put those savings into scholarships for low-income students and their parents to be able to afford their kids participating in high school athletics. And beyond that, I'll sign the bill. I don't like everything about it. I don't agree with everything in it. But again, I don't expect to agree with everything. I'll agree to things in the spirit of compromise. I'm willing to sign that bill but not with a $101 million error.
Governor, what about the issue of trust? Yesterday, the speaker said if you ended up vetoing this, he wasn't sure he could trust you anymore. Republicans are saying you broke your word not to hold the tax bill hostage.
Well, I'm not holding that tax bill hostage. I told them at the outset that I'd sign it independently, and then, they screwed it up, to be honest. I don't know who did. I'm not blaming anybody. Nobody intended to do it, except in the flurry of the last pressure-packed weekend. Those kinds of things happen because people, the professional staff, their staff, the revisor's office, others, the revenue, everybody else doesn't have the time to review these bills and look for every word to find an error. So they're responsible for this $101 million error because they wouldn't get their work done accurately and on time. The bonding bill, again, the House Republicans wouldn't even come out with the bonding bill and tell us what they were proposing till the last week of the session. So that was, passed Sunday night in great rush. The spreadsheet that they handed out didn't conform to the language of the bill. They told legislators to get them to vote for the bill, showing them the spreadsheet that their projects were included when they weren't. And that mayhem is certainly not my responsibility. So, I said truthfully back during the session, assuming the tax bill would be error-free, that I would sign it independently. But it wasn't error-free. And I said, the last 2 weeks, I'm not going to sign a tax bill that has a $101 million error. If I were to sign it and we couldn't agree on a special session for all the other reasons, then that tax bill would become law and we'd be losing that revenue. So it just wasn't a prudent course of action.
In the way that Republicans feel, whether justified or not, but the climate going into negotiations, you've done negotiations before with apparently Republicans fairly upset and bringing up trust issues and so on. Again, whether justified or not, are you hopeful that you can get anything in a reasonably short order?
Well, it's up to them. We all have our trust issues with one another, and they're entitled to theirs, but we need to set those aside for the common good of Minnesota. This isn't about their feelings or my feelings or our relationships. This is about what Minnesota needs, and all those people they brought forth yesterday at the press conference and the people they represent, farmers and veterans and all the others who are there want a tax bill, and I want a tax bill. So let's get this resolved. The people out there who stand to benefit from the bonding bill and from those projects, people are going to put to work around the state, that people will benefit from those improvements to the University of Minnesota and the Minnesota campuses. those students we're trying to attract to those colleges and universities and keep there and keep in Minnesota, they all need this bonding bill, and I mean, we should need to set everything else aside and say, focus on what's good for Minnesota.
Do you have a deadline to decide on the special session beyond which it's just not feasible?
I do my vacation this week to go to California and see my son and friends, so I'm around, and I'll be around, and I'll be around. You know, I mean, I think June 30th is a reasonable deadline, given the fact that, and sooner the better, so we're not getting to a cliff kind of situation. But if the tax bill's not signed on July 1st, then that's a tragedy for Minnesota. But there's no absolute deadline, and if we can't, but I think we should, if we're going to do it at all, we should do it in June, get it done, get it over with, move on, come back, get your work done, legislators, and then move on.
When you say that lawmakers screwed up the tax bill, are you blaming both Democrats and Republicans?
Well, I'm not going to get into this. I don't think anybody meant to make that error. I'm just saying, in the flurry of the passage in the final weekend, is not the opportunity for professional staff to give the bill the kind of proofreading and scrutiny. So I'm not going to blame whomever. I want to get this thing resolved for the benefit of Minnesota, and disappointed that others bring their own interpretation to what is can be done by whom and how in order to make that correction. Because to me, the statute is just extremely clear. But that aside as well, my position is, and it's the one that my Commissioner of Revenue has to apply and would have to defend in court, is that the letter of the law means the letter of the law when it's clear and unambiguous. And that takes precedent over any other matter of legislative intent or letters or anything else. So it has to be corrected by the full legislature, which would mean a special session if it's going to take effect about July 1st. And that's just the reality that everybody needs to accept and deal with. And let's move beyond that. Let's get this done. Okay? Thank you very much.